smoking a fair bit, and there's a worry, I won't hide that from you. It's up to temperature now and it's still smoking, so I am worried about that. Hello everyone and welcome to you and to the influenzo that has arrived. So very first of all, big thanks to Lee from Dunt Barn. They're the guys who were storing the car on behalf of the seller. They're still trading, they're still allowed to work, so they delivered the car, and both me and the seller were equally keen for this transaction to happen. On his side, presumably because he's terrified that I would change my mind, and on my side because I'd already handed over the money to the auction house, because there is a rule that you have to pay within 3 days. And I wasn't that comfortable in the current climate not having the car. So we made sure there was relevant social distancing and so on. And Lee was really helpful to deal with. So if you need any car storage stuff or car transportation or anything like that, he seems like a really great guy, and I'm going to go and pay him a visit once the lockdown is done so we can have a look at his facility. But if you need anything, give him a buzz. So today we're going to have a look at how the car was delivered. We're going to look at what you get for your 34k when you're buying the cheapest 348 in the UK. So we'll go through the body, the interior, have a look at all that kind of stuff, and then we will try and get it started. First of all, let's have a look at how the car was actually delivered, because that will give you a hint of what's to come. Unfortunately, they did manage to get it started on the day, but it didn't run very well, and when it arrived, I didn't even try and start it, we just ended up pushing it into the garage. Back to that in a minute, but first of all, let's take a look at what I've got for my 31 grand, or 34 grand including the buyer's premium. So, at first glance, she really looks rather good. Paintwork looks nice and shiny. There's no terrible uneven panel gaps or anything like that. Very nice. Now, looking around the car, there are a few things that jump out. So there's the odd very small bubble. I mean, they're tiny, I don't even know if you can see them on the phone. There, little bit, that actually looks like paint. A little bubble there. Coming round to the side here, there's a bit of bubbling there, which is a very commonplace. But actually, I'll show you the other bubbling before I think is there a bit there? No. But importantly, all the arches, there's no filler. You can feel through that they're completely clean on that side. There's no filler going through those. So that's excellent. So on the whole, the bodywork, it's pretty good really for the money, I'd say, for a car of this kind of cash. Not bad at all, not bad at all. I mean, it's not perfect, don't get me wrong, and there is the odd bubble, but on the whole, fairly pleased with that. Moving on to the interior. The interior is actually fairly good. There is a bit of an issue there by the key, which by the way has snapped. So yeah, there's this sort of sticky stuff here, and it's obviously some sort of past repair that hasn't been done very well, I don't know. This was really worn in pictures I've seen, so they must have changed it. This is still a bit warm, but it's fine. The seats are great. They have been reupholstered, I think, in the last couple of years, as we'll see from the receipts later. All the switchgear looks okay, not too bad anyway. For a Ferrari of this era, there's a little bit of wear here and there, but a bit of a dye for that. The vinyl that covers the doors and stuff, I think it's vinyl and not leather. I think we'll put pay to that and it won't be so much of an issue. Let's have a quick look at the engine bay. So it all looks fairly tidy in here really, it doesn't look bad at all. The ignition leads look pretty new, and distributor there, it looks okay. Here's the chassis number and everything. Doesn't look like it's been messed with. It's got this new cover for the boot, which is really rather nice, and I saw from the documentation that that had been added previously. There's quite a lot of room in there actually, and I guess it needs this because although there's this barrier, there'll be a lot of heat coming through from the engine bay. But from what I can see in here, it all looks all right. Those carbs, you can see, you know, they look very dirty, at least the outside, so it doesn't look like they've ever been taken off the car. So that's one of the things that I want to do and that I'll be checking through. And then let's have a quick look at the front here. Okay, spare wheel well. That jet washer bottle can be troublesome. All looks fairly tidy in there. Tyres look pretty new. Wheels all in good nick. Initial impressions are pretty good then. You'd expect a bit of wear in a car of this age, but she looks okay. There's a few little rust bubbles. They don't particularly concern me. I haven't had a look under the car yet, and I'll have to do that. See what state everything is in. The front wheels feel a little bit, there's a little bit of tiny little knock in there, and I think that that will be the bearings. They can just be tightened up on these unless they're really worn. So I might have a look and see if I can repack those and tighten them up. Also, I'm going to go through the car and see what works and what doesn't in terms of electrics. But before that, I think we need to address the issue of the non-starting. So that was an awesome start on the Ferrari. Had to push it into the garage and it's not working. Apparently at the storage place they said that it took them all morning, but they did get it to run. And he did mention there is an issue with the carbs, so I'll have to take a look at that. But not the best thing, and I've just managed to snap the key as well with like an absolutely tiny amount of force. And I presume that these are literally like, I don't know, thousands of pounds for a replacement shitty plastic Ferrari key. Good start. First thing was to take the airbox cover off and get to those carbs and have a good look around there. And then I also wanted to check for spark all around. All the spark plugs were working, but some were quite weak. Well, I don't know if I'd call that a roaring success, but it was definitely progress. When the car arrived yesterday, it wouldn't do anything. There was no sign of life. And all I did really tonight was charge the battery up. And when I was checking for spark earlier, I noticed that it felt like it wanted to start, so I thought I'd give it a go. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't running well. It sounded like maybe on 4 cylinders, but it was doing something, and that's progress. Next, I checked the carbs over, had a look at the linkages, and gave all the idle jets a good clean. Just got the distributor cap off, and it is pretty awful, which, in a weird way, is good news, because it could explain the fact that it doesn't start very well, misfires, etc. I don't know how much you'll be able to see. I'll try and show you. But you can see that all these ridges here are basically all scored, and they have corrosion on them and stuff. So it will need a new cap, but I will order one, but in the meantime I'll just clean this up and see if I can get the engine running any better. Okay, I've cleaned up the distributor cap as much as I can, and I've reconnected it all. I hope I've plugged it in the right way. I've checked and rechecked, but you never know. Let's try and crank it over and see what happens, if anything. Fabulous. That's just ticking over quite nicely. A little bit of smoke. I think that that's also because it's been flooded and fucked around with, so if it gets cleared out, I think that will sort it out. But that's brilliant news. If it stops smoking, that'll be great as well. Even better. Well, she's smoking a fair bit, and that is a worry. I won't hide that from you. It's up to temperature now, and it's still smoking, so I am worried about that. Well, I've gone through a lot of emotions on buying the Influenzo. I was ecstatic when I first won it. I was really worried from about an hour after that, until the point where I started finding out some information about it, and then my hopes went up because it sounded like it wasn't a complete dog. Then it was delivered and it wasn't running, so I had a few more worries. Then I worked on it for a couple of days, as you saw, and found the main issues, and it started up right up and started running really well, so I was absolutely ecstatic. Then the engine smoke started up, and I wasn't worried initially, but as it carried on, I did start to worry. My 964 had the same thing when it started smoking, and that was rings. So I am worried about that, and it got up to temperature and it still hasn't cleared. Now, I have a feeling that possibly by taking it on a long run, that might help. I mean, you can't... Ultimately, I bought this car at auction, and I'm well aware that there's always a risk there, and it's my responsibility. I've looked up the cost of an engine rebuild on one of these, and I think it's something like 20 grand or something ludicrous. So let's really keep our fingers crossed that it's not something along those lines. But quite often on a proper run, the rings, if the car hasn't been used for a while, the rings sort of not shrink quite, but if you take it on a proper run, it warms up properly and goes, they can start sealing better again. So that is my hope. But we don't know at this point. I would take it for a run, that's what I normally do, and see if it clears, but because of the lockdown I can't do that. I think later in the week I'm going to have to go to Sainsbury's, and rather than taking the BMW, as long as this seems to be running reliably, smoke aside, then I might take it to Sainsbury's instead and see if that run makes things any better. So keep an eye out for the update with that, and I'll put that on as soon as I do that. Thank you all so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Thanks for following me with the Influenzo, and keep your fingers crossed that maybe it's just being a bit temperamental because it hasn't been used for a while. Thank you.